So yeah, I mean, so here, but that's the difference that's the difference in the instruments is that Carl's coming from this other place. He's coming from, he's still look at him, the gnome. He's still out gigging, man, doing it, making it happen,
yeah.
and playing with the best cats in the city. Okay. So I mean, come on, like I said, he's an artist first, a luthier second, and by the way, he is the best bass luthier on the planet, hands down. As a side, this is my side thing. Okay, I'm a player for my side thing, so it gives you how great this guy is. So anyway,
He's trying to get a good price for the repair
that's exactly
job.
right. I'm trying to sell some basses here. Okay, so I'm an early endorsee of Mr. Thompson here, so I've sold a few basses for him to many of my students and other
Oh yeah,
people,
that's for
and,
sure. Yeah, I told Brian Mooney, Ryan Thompson,
That's
who
right.
else? Let's see.
Buddy Savino,
Buddy Savino.
all great players, journeyman
Yep.
players.
They all have respect for you too. Brian was always. He said, He said, Jerry doesn't take any shit. He's just like you go study with him. It's a serious endeavor, and as it should be.
Keeping it real.
Yeah, if you want to
Keep
come,
it real.
I know people come to me and they start talking about, I'm not going to do that,
Right. That's right. No, it's you have to keep it real.
Yeah.
So getting back to our story. So here, and I have another story to follow up with
Oh,
this
boy.
one that I'm,
You got
that
enough
I'm
room
doing.
there?
Okay. So
I have another card we could put on.
Carl cracked me up. And we're sitting and talking. And I have to understand, and I'm sure you guys are probably thinking, I'm thinking about this, about the bass and everything. And we're talking about everything else other than the bass, okay? Oh yeah, at the time I was working with David Sanchez, and I was in the band.
And David got a double neck.
David bought a curly double neck, curly maple double neck, which he still has, and is I think it's the only double neck guitar that you ever made. It is a beautiful piece, and was made with curly and also Brazilian rosewood, which was gorgeous, and you can't get anymore. You can't get Brazilian rosewood. Anyway, so we're talking, and I'm starting to think like, oh my God, am I going to get a bass here or what? I'm thinking. Next thing you know, Carl we're still talking. He gets up and walks over to the piece of wood and turns it, and then goes back and sits down, and we're continuing to talk. I'm like scratching my head, like, what did I get myself into here? What I'm saying, And we're talking. We probably talked for about another 45 minutes, 50 minutes. And then he said, excuse me. He picked up a grease pencil, walked over to the piece of wood, and marked out a box, linear box, on this piece of wood. And he goes, okay, now I can make you a bass. There's your neck. So here I am talking to this knucklehead, okay? All the time he's staring at that wood and looking at it. And of course, what do I know? I'm looking at the wood. It's a piece of wood. What are you looking at? It's a piece of wood, right? So I want to show you why I think that Carl is the genius that he is. And I want to show you the piece of wood that is on the back of this neck. It is the best piece of neck wood that you would ever want to see. It's
Be careful.
straight as an arrow. It's a one-piece bird's eye neck, and look at this grain. You could write music on those grain lines. That's how even they are and straight. Okay? Now, Carl, I understand that this was the first of a series, I guess, of necks that you kind of cut your teeth
It wasn't
on.
really a series. It was just I've told that story on
Okay.
video many times. That this, and when I saw the way this was put together, I remembered. That's the first one that I did like that with that kind of construction.
But look at the grain. I mean, people are amazed at this grain. Okay, when I show them that, and they say, "How old is this bass?" I said, 35 years. And they look down the bass, they do the old look down the bass, and they go, well, wait a second. That neck's straight. I said, yeah, it's a Carl Thompson. That's it, man, you know. So,
I know when people, that's the one thing I get when people, the first time people pick up the instrument, you know, play my instrument, they go, wow, it's really feels right. And I always give that old line, that's the way it's supposed to be. You know, that's the way
that's the way it's supposed. That's
the way it's
exactly
supposed to be. You know?
So now I'm going to tell another story. Okay, so anyway, again, 13 months later, I get a phone call from Carl. Actually, I probably wore out my welcome calling Carl. Is the bass ready? Is the bass ready? You know, are we home yet? Are we home yet? Are we there yet, Daddy? You know, call and, hey, how's the bass doing? And I remember calling Carl, I guess it was after, had to be 6.5, 7 months. And I called up, says, hi, Carl, how you doing? Oh, great. How's the bass coming? Well, I think the neck is finally done. I said, the neck is finally done? It's 7 months. He says, yeah, and that's exactly how long it takes for that neck to be done. I said, oh, okay, all right, that's exactly right. You know, because that is, the bass is built around the neck. So I get this, so finally the time comes, and I get the bass, go to the shop, and one of the reasons why we buy Thompsons as well is I want to show you something. Taking the strap off. Now, taking the strap off of a bass, I'm not holding the bass at all. You see that? It is perfectly balanced. Well, when I first got his bass, I did a test. I did this exact test, and the bass did this. And Carl says, I know what you're doing. Wait a second. I looked down, and there are only 3 knobs, and there was no knob on the 4th thing here. And then you put a knob on here, and then you did this, and you said, okay, now it's balanced. And it stayed. So that's how exact
those were brass. Those were those brass knobs.
Those were those brass knobs. That's
yeah.
right.
No, right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how much of an exact science his necks are. Okay, and the weight on the bases. It's a
and the strap button being off center too.
and the strap being off
You know
center.
whose idea? You know where that came from?
What the hell happened there? What's
That was
that?
Russell George.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Actually, before I started making instruments, when I was just repairing everybody's thing, we were always trying to get the fenders to stay a little bit better, you know. And Russell was in there one day, and he says, Carl, and if we moved the strap button up, it would force the weight down a little bit, you know. And it did. It didn't make fenders balance perfectly, but it helped.
It helps.
So whenever I started making instruments, I just automatically did that. That was Russell.
Wow, no kidding. Wow, that's great.
No, actually,
What a great idea.
yeah. And
Oh, really?
Russell, I don't know if you know, you might not even know, Russell and I grew up in the same town.
I didn't know that, no.
Russell's the reason I came to New York.
Is that right?
I wouldn't have come here if it wasn't for
How about that?
Russell came, his brother was my age. Russell's a few years older than me. He always tells people, he says, I knew Carl when he was in diapers, you know. And he basically did. His sister used to babysit me because my older sister and his sister were in the same class. And whenever my mother was doing, my sister would take care of me. And Russell's sister, her name was Maddie Lou George. She would come down and hang out. So she remembers me too, you know. But Russell was always like ahead of me, you know. And he went out, played with Disney and all those people. Well, you know Russell, big time. Yeah, he had a great career.
He had a great career. Yeah.
And you know, and he was like my mentor when I was a kid. You know, he would come when he would come back to Pittsburgh, like with Joe Newman or whoever, P.B. Russell, Dizzy. I'd be playing somewhere, and Russell would find time to come out and hang out. And he'd sit there and stare at me and.
What are you doing here, right?
What is that? You know. I used to get all kinds of. I'd sit there.
Yeah.
And you know, over the years, I had a career in Hollywood with Billy Ward, and I did
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff, you know. And then the Army called me. But after I came out of the Army, I was going to go back out to California, and Russell was home, and he said, Carl, you've always wanted to come. I said, Russell, I am not the musician you are. New York's scared. I always thought it'd be a great idea, but I never thought I could do anything here. I'm not Russell George. I'm not that level, you know. And he said, Carl, you never know.
That's exactly
And he set me up with Dan. He was hanging out at Danny Armstrong's shop. And he's the one who set me up with Danny.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that too.
I was sitting on Russell's back porch in my hometown when he was home one time, and he said, Danny's going to call here tonight. And we said, fine. And Danny did. Danny called right there to Russell's house in Pitcairn, where I grew up. Okay. And we talked. And he said, well, Carl, if you want to come up, Russell says you're very, very, and he said, I'm looking for somebody. And Russell said, you know, if you came up this way, you could sneak in, so to speak. You'd be right in the heart of all this stuff, and you wouldn't have to come as like a starting guitar player trying to get a gig on the corner somewhere, you know. It was a godsend. Danny, everybody, well, you know Danny.
Yeah,
Danny. Everybody came in there. And it was like, not only did he do repair work and all that stuff for all these famous people, it was like a booking agent. Back in those days, Odeo Studios, remember
Yeah,
Odeo? All
that's right,
all those studios. They put little demo dates. They'd call Danny. Anybody there sober?
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got a new kid. He's like 29. He just came in a couple of weeks ago, Carl Thompson. How is he? Yeah, you can do it. Danny, you sure? He says, yeah, just get your guitar, go over and do it. You know, I go over to Odeo Studios and plug in, and next thing you know, I was doing, little shit. You know, and
That's all it takes.
you know, and had I come here as a guitar player, just that, who knows? You know, I might have gone back to Pittsburgh. You know.
That's well, yeah. It's tough. It's
And back in those days, it was like I tell people today. You know, back then you had to be a musician. I mean, you really had to play.
You had to play.
You had to. You walk into those studios, man. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. It's the truth.
Even simple things like Muzak, we
That's
did.
right,
I did
yeah.
some of those. You know, people said they laugh. I said, well, you may laugh, but I'll tell you what. Some of the best musicians in New York did those things, and you had to be a good musician to do it. I mean,
That's right.
You walk in there, we're going to do something for Woolworth's background, whatever it was. You
I
know.
did some
and
of those
here it
sessions
is,
too, absolutely.
and then they go, have you got any questions? And nobody has any questions. 1, 2, and there you go. You know.
It's a gig, and they pay you real money,
Yeah.
right? And if you're a musician, I don't care if
Right.
you're playing polkas
That's right.
or bebop.
That's right.
It doesn't matter. It's all the same
I
notes.
tell people, they call me a jazz musician. Yeah, look, I know the lyrics to polkas. Just because you think you're so funny, just because you think you're so hot. Remember that one?
Yes.
Just because it cost me to spend all my money, you laugh and call me old Santa Claus. I'm telling you, baby, I'm through with you. Just
Oh, there you go.
because.
That's it. That's it. Well, and there's a lesson there, folks, and that the lesson is that in order to survive today or any day in music, you
Unless
can't
you're a
have
star or
musical
something.
tunnel vision. You know, unless you're a star, you know, unless you
get lucky.
you're one out of 3 or 4 million people that get lucky, and record company spends a whole bunch of money on you, and they break you, and you get, you know, a very popular tour all over the world. And even then, okay, I did all that, and even then, it's not
easy.
it's not a guarantee because it only lasts for a short period of time. But Carl, I think, is being a little modest about his playing ability. He's quite the player, and a lot of guys who are now players in the city, they go to where Carl plays now to sit in to have a good time with Carl.
I'm very grateful for that. You know, I tell people too, like when I was younger, back as a kid, you know, listening to the radio and playing all those Charlie Parker, Danny Getz, all those things. Wow, how do they do that? I get lost just listening to them. I'll never, and I'm not even saying that I'm one of those guys, but I am a New York musician,
You're a player. Yeah.
and I'm, like you said, I'm playing with some of the best musicians. So that makes me even more so than building the instruments, of course. 'Cause that's what I came here for. I didn't come here to build instruments.
that's right.